He's also one of the best and smartest coaches and lifters out there. Matt has a bunch of world records in gear, and he's one of the strongest raw lifters that you could find. Matt is also a coach for the Armed Forces, and he works closely with firefighters and stuff like that around the Columbus area. Matt, thanks for being on.
Yeah, not a problem.
Yeah, man. It was great to have you on. We were one of the people we've wanted. We say this to a lot of our guests, but we always only interview guests that we think are really knowledgeable and smart, and you're one of the guys that we wanted to talk to. I know we've had the opportunity to train at Ludus with you once or twice, and so we figured we'd have you on because you're one of the smartest guys out. We want to get some of your information out, man.
Yeah, man, sounds good.
I will say we've been out to Ludus. I think we've trained out at Ludus twice, and then we went there once as well. It's one of the coolest gyms I've ever been in.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's unique in a sense, and it's got more than you would ever need. And I know you've made some additions too, and obviously your belt squat's gotten big over the past year or two. So it's kind of cool to see your progression, after lifting almost into a business, and with the belt squat, with everything else you're working on. So it's been cool to kind of see you since I got into lifting, how you've progressed as into a business almost.
Yeah, the key in this field, I think, is just like with knowledge, just being multifaceted.
Yeah,
absolutely. All I understood was biomechanics. I would only be limited as a coach.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to study things that I don't feel like I have as much of a grasp on. That's why I've been kind of really tight and friends with Stan Efferding and Charles Falkland. They were kind of working my weaknesses the last couple of years as far as what I felt was knowledge gaps that I had. I felt like I was a master of programming and understanding intensity and volume and deloads, but those guys blew my top back with all the nutrition and recovery stuff that I've been learning from them the last few years.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially learning how to stay stronger and get leaner, which is, not only great for performance, but also for longevity,
Yeah. I know I've applied a lot of the vertical diet to myself, and it's been great.
Yeah. I think that's the thing is, I've always just tried to not have a niche. I've tried to master as many things as I can get my hands on, and, and just keep progressing. And that way it allows you to kind of grow where things are growing versus trying to keep beating a dead horse in one area. If all I was, capable of was utilizing programming and training for powerlifting, my grasp on other populations would be very limited, if at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're one of the coaches that, one of the things that, I followed you for a while. One of the things that I can say about you, like you mentioned, is you have a very widespread knowledge of training as far as, I know you have a group of lifters that you train with at Ludus, but I know you work also with the Armed Forces and the fire departments and stuff, and that's interesting because, like you said, if you go one route, you're kind of limiting yourself and you're limiting the people that you train with, whereas you have gone so many different routes. I know you've done talks at like the TSAC and stuff like that. I'm sure that helps a lot with your training too, because you can kind of piece things together and look at things a different way. Whereas if you were just focusing on powerlifting or just biomechanics in general, you might not get that outwards perspective.
Yeah, and that's the thing is you got to surround yourself with people that bring out your weaknesses. The NSCA had reached out to me in 2011 when I was working with 4th Infantry and redesigning all of their weight training protocols in Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
So main base is in Colorado as far as the NSCA. They're right there in the Springs. And Scott Caulfield kind of thinks outside the box as far as the NSCA is concerned. It was like, we need guys like you speaking and showing the stuff that the other the other people are doing that's a little bit more non-traditional. And as soon as I started speaking at the TSAC and the National Strength Conditioning Conferences and those things, I think it started to open up to people's minds of different ways to train and thought processes to designing workouts versus, I think what ends up happening with a lot of people, especially powerlifting and football, and you can name any other sport, is that they specify in their thought patterns too quickly. Mm-hmm. And that is usually the end game, and the issue that's usually the problem with most of the sports is I get people message me all the time and go, well, my son wants to play football. I'm like, well, you know, is he agile? Can he move? Can he, you know, can he do somersaults and cartwheels and deadlift? And, you know, I mean, you need to be able to do tons of athletic things in order to be, you know, awesome. I mean, if you gave anything to Bo Jackson athletically to do, he'd probably do really well at it.
Yeah.
And I think people don't understand that. So when, you know, when they see powerlifting or something else, and then they automatically think, well, I need to be traditionally squatting with a straight bar and no box, or I do everything specifically to how their competitions may arise, and that ends up making a very short career.
Uh-huh.
So, you know, it's just teaching people that, you know, you need to have a very generalized strength and conditioning base in order to specify and be your best down the road.
Yeah, and what's cool about you, like Gray mentioned, you do stuff with the military, firefighters, but I know even when we were at your facility, we saw just older ladies that were strong as hell that just did it because, you know, they got into it and it was just something for them to do. And so it's not just one thing, or athletes or powerlifters that you train everyone, it seems like.
Yeah, I mean, anybody that's got a work ethic, you know, we'll bring them in and we'll make them as good as they can make them. I've learned so much from just training general populations and firemen that maybe weren't into fitness, which, you know, you would think is crazy. I mean, but I would say 80% of the fire departments are not really into physical fitness at all.
Absolutely not.
It's funny. It's crazy because their job requires them to be physically fit, and that's why I think you see so much of the insurance problems and, you know, so many of the guys getting injured on the job and it costs the taxpayers a lot of money. It's really the simple fact that, you know, it's just not in the culture. So when I try to train people, you know, they teach me as much as I teach them. I mean, watching how somebody that, you know, maybe has tight hamstrings just genetically, not from training or anything of that nature, if I can get them better and their lower back pain to go away, sometimes it sparks an interest in, well, hell, how I did that with this guy maybe will work for the top level athletes. And a lot of times it's true. So my special forces guys have indirectly learned things from firemen through me, and my firemen have learned things from special forces. And, you know, I brought all that from powerlifting and then biomechanics background, and then stuff I've learned from Charles and stuff I've learned from Stan. And it's just a big mixing pot. And what I found is that there are no limitations for anyone. It's the limitations we put up on ourselves, you know? You know, most people would think, well, gosh, I can't deadlift 300 pounds. I'm a 65-year-old woman, you know, and that's not true. You can do it. It's just doing it smart, making sure that you're balanced first, and how much time and effort and energy are you willing to put in, and then also how hard are you willing to train, and smart are you willing to train to where you're not going to get hurt. I mean, that's the thing, is like it's easier to get stronger than it is to push too hard and always be combating injuries all the time.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I as long as I've followed you, at least, like I have your DVDs and I've talked to you in person a little bit when we were at Ludus. I feel like that's one of the things that you preach that, you know, when you started preaching it, I really didn't hear a lot of people talking about it, and you made it very understandable. You talk about balance when you preach things such as like your high rep warm ups and stuff like that. You know, people will look at that from the outside and say like, oh, okay, I have to do, you know, sets of 20 on a reverse hyper to warm up. But what's actually happening, at least what I think is your mindset in that is, you know, not only are you pre-fatiguing those muscles, but you're also building them up with smaller submaximal workloads.
Yeah. Well, you're increasing fitness level.
Yeah.
You're increasing conditioning and general physical preparation. But one of the big things you're doing with that, let's just say your example, reverse hyper, is if I put somebody in a reverse hyper as a warm-up for 20 reps for multiple sets, it's probably because their lower back or their glute activation is a weakness. And if I can take that muscle and potentiate, i.e., bring about motor pattern changes into that muscle before the core movement, i.e., like the squat or the deadlift, and not only does it reduce injury, but it also increases performance because you're telling the brain to go to a different set of muscles to help with the actual exercise. So when you kind of decondition the strengths that are always going to be there, i.e., like the quadriceps, and then you attack the hamstrings, glutes, and say lower back with a reverse hyper, you're actually going to potentiate them into the main movement, which actually gives you more horsepower.
Gotcha.
Now, it takes time, because eventually what ends up happening is that, you do have that pre-fatigue, but after the body gets conditioned enough, that's not pre-fatigue anymore, that's potentiation.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of what I fell along the lines. I mean, it's kind of a cool story. How that happened was 2000 and early 2012, my old training partner, multiple world record holder, George Halbert, asked me to do a bench press competition with him.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew I was probably around 585 to 600, but I didn't know for sure because I was still pretty deep into gear then.
Yeah.
So we go and train for this thing because he wants to break Mike McDonald's 198 bench record, which was like 584.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm training with him. So we started working out, and probably 4 months into the training, we go to the competition, and I bench 600 actually pretty easy. Which back then there was less than 30 guys that had ever done it, and there was only less than, I think, 13 that had ever done it as a full meat lifter, not just a bench only guy.
Gotcha.
So it still is, but it's a very prestigious list. I'd say there's more guys now that can do it, but here's the point. So I realized, okay, well, shit, if I can hit that 600 bench, which is a pretty big milestone, I know my squat and my deadlift were pretty close because I used to train raw every 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So I started looking at Dan Kovacs's 22:02 all-time world record total, and I was like, I think I can beat it with maybe a year or two of training. So I go to my first competition completely raw, no knee wraps, and I squat 771, and then I bench 584, and then I pull, I think, like 750. So I'm at like 2120 or something. I'm pretty close. It's like 2120 or somewhere around that range, or maybe right under or right over. And but what I found is that I had benched in 2012 600, and in 2013 I could only do 584.
Mm-hmm.
And I started looking at the training, and I was like, well, why the hell was I not able to bench? It appeared that I was probably able to bench maybe 606 to 611. I started looking at my training, and what I figured out was I actually wasn't in shape enough after squats. So I would squat something close to 800 raw, and then my body for the day was completely fucking wrecked, and then I'd have to go into the bench press, and I only had a subpar amount of energy left.
Mm-hmm.
So the way I attacked that, instead of saying, well, I just need to get stronger, which is like what most people would do, I started realizing that I probably needed to get more in shape. So what I did was that I would train my bench. I would do multiple sets of reps, i.e. the 4 sets of 25 that I'm known for. I would do 4 sets of 25 dumbbells, say with like 30-pound dumbbells before I would bench. Now, at first, that didn't do anything. But as I built that up slowly over the next 6 or 8 months, I was able to do 100-pound dumbbells for 4 sets of 25 before I even did max effort bench press or speed.
Yeah.
Now, what that did is that no matter how bad the squatting beat me up and made me tired, I was used to doing thousands of pounds of pressing work before I would max or do speed work. So the next meet I went to, I actually squatted the world record at 832 just in a belt, and then I benched 606 in the same meet, which was one of the highest, and probably still is, the highest subtotal ever done.
Mm-hmm.
There was a few guys in the super heavies that had done a couple more, like Don Reinhold and a few other guys, but that was a mid 1400 subtotal with just 2 lifts. And but what I found is that 606 bench was actually pretty easy because I was able to do pre-fatiguing dumbbell sets before I was benching. So that way I had all the energy I ever needed.
Yeah, that's
how it started 5 years ago.
That's something that Gray and I have both implemented into our training.
Yeah. Since
we started training conjugate, it's something we picked up from you a few years ago, and I think it's had a huge just having that extra time under tension. I think it goes a long way.
Yeah. So the next thing is you got your normal lift, which is your bench press, but then what you have to also potentiate and gain strength and size and coordination with is the weakest muscle group. So every time before I bench, I do 100 lat pull downs and 100 tricep push downs. Mm-hmm. And that makes me lock my lats in properly and also makes me on dominant when I press so that my shoulder doesn't overtake any of the movement, therefore I never have shoulder problems.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So there's a whole reasoning behind how and why you do it. And then when you go to a competition, you don't do that kind of a warm-up. You just actually warm up the main lift. You have all this extra energy because you're used to pre-fatiguing everything. So it's a huge advantage to not only energy systems, but potentiating the weak muscle groups and just having them extra time under tension.
So you're probably the most well-known guy for going from gear to raw. And being successful in both areas. Can you talk a little bit about what that was like? What you had to change? Why did you go raw?
Yeah.
I think you've said before you kind of wanted to be one of the guys that could just walk into a gym and if you can't bench 405 or bench 500 raw, then you're not strong. Is that kind of what made you want to do it?
I wouldn't say that was the direct drive. It was maybe a third down or fifth down drive. The big thing was that I would say about 2010, Stan Efferding started doing a lot of his big lifts raw, and then Eric Lillibridge had come along, started doing some other big stuff raw, and then you see Andre Milanichev start coming along and doing some big stuff raw. And you started to see that it was getting a lot of attention because I think it was applicable in average people's minds. It was applicable to what they do in the gym. So if somebody says, well, hell, I bench 500, but I don't do it in a bench shirt, somebody, an average Joe, is going to look at that and think that that's way stronger than a guy doing 800 in a shirt because they don't understand it, right? It's almost like to the general population, gear lifting is like circus lifts. They don't mean anything. And to us, that were in the geared lifting at the time, it did mean stuff to us. But to the average population, and this is where it started to turn my head. It's like 2011 and 12, I'm working with a lot of special forces guys, and they're asking me, well, how much you bench? And I don't tell them my shirt numbers. I said, I bench like 585. And they're like, wow, that's really strong. But I didn't ever have 585 in a record book. Like I had done it and whatnot. So the point was that I saw that people could relate to Lillibridge more, they could relate to Efferding more, and I was still young enough with a low enough amount of miles on my body that through my training that was already somewhat raw, I knew that there was a gap that I could probably get into raw competition and not have it be too big of a hiccup in my training because I was already training a lot without gear. So what people don't realize is that I was very non-traditional in gear training. When I squatted 1,200 and did the world record in equipment, I did 765 with 5 chain on each side, completely in just a belt only to a below parallel box. Mm-hmm. That's a 965 top weight squat.
That's a big raw.
Completely raw, yeah.
Yeah. So what I would do would be I would use a tiered system where I would do 1 week where I did no gear, and it actually gave my CNS a break and made my muscles get beat up because I didn't have any support. And then the next week I would put just say briefs on and maybe light knee wraps. And then the next week I would go full gear and dial in the technique and then train really, really heavy with those. So I basically made 3 different ways to train like a powerlifter. And what I found was that made me not overtrain. Whereas if I trained in full gear, I would notice that my muscles would get weaker. Then maybe my CNS would get burned out because I wasn't training enough differently. Make sense? So what I found in my generation was there were a lot of guys that were training in suits and briefs and bench shirts all the time. They never did any real raw work. So I go to a bench only meet probably I would say in 11 maybe. It was down in Cincinnati. I went to this bench meet. And I watched this guy that had the world record at 242. He could bench like 930 in a shirt, right? And I'm at this meet watching him warm up, and he couldn't do 405 raw.
Oh, wow. Holy shit.
And he actually missed 405 raw in the warm-up room before he put his shirt on. And that was like a huge wake-up call to me. Wow. Because, one, I didn't want to be built like that. He's built like he just was a hot dog eater. You know what I mean? Like the guy, I was impressed with the shirt bench. But when he took his shirt off and he was just standing there, he just kind of looked like a fat dude. And I'm like, I don't want to be like that.
Yeah.
And not that I ever really was, but the point is, like, I started to realize that if I benched even a world record in the shirt, that only 500 people cared. But if I broke a world record raw, thousands of people cared. Yeah. And for my type of job, and the type of people that I train, like firemen and stuff like that are not going to go wear a bench shirt to move somebody out of a bathtub.
Yeah.
They don't care how strong I am in that equipment, and I started to realize that my grasp on the strength world was going to be limited. So personally, what I decided to do was, since my training was already, 35% raw, I just said, screw it, threw all the whole marbles in. And that's when I did my first raw meet and hit the third highest total of all time. And then the next meet broke the world squat record and then the bench record, and then had one of the highest sub totals raw.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it started. And it wasn't necessarily for the gratitude of the lifts as much as I knew I could do it, because the way I trained was really smart and I was strong in multiple faucets,
Yeah. What's cool too about it is it goes both ways. Like when you were training in gear, you said you had one raw day a month, but I just saw on Instagram you were just squatting in your old briefs when you were over 300 pounds to save your hips and your body because you're training raw now. So it goes both ways.
It does. But I'm using the gear, in my opinion, right now. I'm using the gear what it was intended for. It was intended to let you lift a little bit heavier without beating up the joints. But the problem is that back when I first started in lifting gear, which was 1994, those briefs gave me more than my freaking squat suit did back then.
Yeah, the technology wasn't very good then, right?
No, it was a sewed-up singlet that was a little bit stiffer than a singlet. Here's my point. My point is that originally the gear was designed to help people protect themselves and be able to lift a little heavier with a little bit better technique. And then what ended up happening is the technology caught up to people's egos and then started making it to where it's adding 500 pounds to a lift. And that I think we can all agree, is just insane.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, like I said, those briefs, I can put them on by myself. But what I noticed is that my hips and my lower back in sections feel a lot better. So, but you also, if you look back at my Instagram post, you'll see that I did not use briefs on Tuesday for my speed work.
Yeah.
So I put them in when my body feels like it needs to, and it just lets me squat hard or fast or whatever I want if I feel like my body needs a little bit of a joint break. Now, it does allow me to lift a little bit of the heavier weights, but in reality, it's really doing is keeping my joints and my lower back from getting any more mileage on it. So the closer I get to 40 years old now, which isn't too far away, I think I calculated after this last meet that I have done near 50 meets already.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, I've done almost 50 competitions since 1993, which, is a lot. So basically what I'm saying is for people to listen to is just train smart. Like, don't put extra mileage on your body. Get your muscles constantly fatigued and tired. Change the angles and the pressures, and make sure that your body is adjusting to what you're doing, and you're not just wearing yourself out for no reason. I think should be the end goal for all of us, is to get as strong as we can, but also keeping in mind that mileage is a huge issue as we age. So you have to make sure that everything you're doing has potency and understanding versus just training to train.
Gotcha. You mentioned a little bit earlier, I think, about surrounding yourself with people that are smart and they know what they're talking about and stuff like that. And just now talking about the gear made me think about it, and I feel like everybody will want to hear. Obviously you trained at Westside. So could you tell us a little bit about how you got into gear and what led you to Westside?
Yeah, sure. So what you got to understand is back in the day, there were raw records that nobody really knew of or talked about, and the big area, especially in Indiana where I grew up, the big thing was the ADFPA and the USAPL taking that over. Now the USAPL didn't have raw or equipped divisions because the equipment hadn't gotten as advanced enough to really change anything. So, it was still a single ply, like marathon squat suits and Z suits, and you could only wear a certain length of knee wraps. But the equipment, if you were lucky, would give you anywhere from 60 to 80 pounds on your squat, and that's if you knew how to use it. Same kind of like when Eddie Cohen was at his best; those equipment didn't really do a whole lot. So we were always used to squat suits that were pretty much 10 times tighter than a singlet, and knee wraps and things of that nature. But back then, there was just the number. It was what was your total. It wasn't if it was raw, single-fire gear. You know, it was just how strong were you, because nobody calculated how much the gear was helping, because it honestly back then wasn't helping that much.
Gotcha.
So gear was always a part of the lifting process when I was younger. I would say before 21. And then obviously only being a couple hours away from Columbus, Ohio, I had come from a smaller town where we had a couple of guys that were really strong. So like the one guy that taught me how to bench, his name was Tim. He was a 500-pound raw bencher at under 190 pounds body weight.
Jesus.
So yeah, this is the guy that taught me how to bench press. So it wasn't that I wasn't around strong guys when I was younger. I had felt like at that point I had just maxed out their education level and how much they were going to be able to get me stronger, which was absolutely true. So it wasn't like a bad breakup there or anything of that nature. It was just the fact that I was starting to get stronger than they were, and nobody really knew what to do with me. So there were two avenues of ways I could have gone. One, everybody knew Ed Cohen in Chicago, which was a couple hours away, and two, people were starting to know Louis Simmons through the Powerlifting USA articles and some of the records that like Rogapool and those and Kenny Patterson and George Halbert had in the 90s. So I decided that Columbus was a better fit for me at the time, although I still look back now and kind of wish I'd have went and trained with Eddie full time. Mm-hmm. But, you know, I don't know if it would have led me down the same path that I am now. So what ended up happening was I go to the Arnold Classic, which back then was, if you weren't into pro strongman or pro powerlifting or pro bodybuilding, you really didn't go to the Arnold Classic. It wasn't like it is today where 1 million people would show up. Yeah. It was a pretty segmented, small thing, which actually I thought was cooler, because it's like, you know, Jesus Christ, can gymnastics and all this other shit give us one thing that we can have for ourselves?
Honestly.
You know, it's like you go now and you see people in fucking baton twirling and all this shit.
They had a Star Wars thing when we were there.
I wish to go into the expo. It doesn't even have to be anything crazy, but like, you got to walk up to the expo, and there's got to be like 315 pounds on the deadlift platform, and if you can't lift it, you can't come in. I think that would be, you know, I'm not saying you got to deadlift 500, but let's just make it 315. I mean, that would cut half the idiots out, you know?
There's so much shit there now. It's disgusting, man.
Yeah. So I'm at the Arnold Classic. I'm 19 years old. I'm a 500-pound bencher, pretty good squatter, pretty good deadlifter. And I see Halbert, I don't know, maybe break a world record in the bench, or maybe it was Kenny Patterson. And all the West Side guys were there. There wasn't any full meat powerlifting there yet. It was just a big bench bash thing from what I can recall. And I see those guys all walking out, and they're freaking huge. John Stafford and all these old ex-badasses, Dave Tate and all those guys. Dave Tate was still huge. And I walk up to him at 19, and I'm like, hey, I'm from Indiana. I'm a pretty good lifter. I'd like to come over and train with you guys sometime. And Louis kind of looks me up and down, and we talk for maybe a brief second or a minute. And he's like, yes, give me a call. You can come down sometime. So that started the ball rolling, and then I went over there, and that was 1999. And so I started training over there, and the amount of stuff that we were doing, like they were using bands and chains and crazy bars and shit that I had never seen before. And Louis talking all the science, and George is really interested in my training because I'm already strong, but I had a couple little form cue things that he wanted to fix on me, and I was just like a big sponge. So when I was a kid, I would drive over there, which was about a 2.5-hour drive one way, and I would train with them, and then I'd drive home. And after about my undergrad and graduate school, I moved over there in 2005, and that's when I became more of a leader of the groups. So a lot of, like, Greg Panora and a lot of those guys were kind of, I wouldn't say under my tutelage, but I was, their main training partner, and we all decided what we were going to do. But usually it would fall either on me or Chuck to decide it, because, we had most of the, I would say, the fortitude to kind of do the reading and figure out what kind of people needed and things like that. So that was kind of my first dab at being like telling other pros how to get better and it actually working. So that's how it started. But like I said, we were doing things at that time that nobody was doing with lifting. And a lot of the magic wasn't necessarily Louis or Westside Gym. It was the fact that we had a lot of guys in there that were willing to try new things to get better. And that pushed us to keep experimenting and trying new stuff, which made it, I would consider the golden era of that gym was 99 to, I'd say, 04, 05,
Yeah, and you kind of touched on how you drove 2.5 hours one way when you were young to train there, and I think that's something that people miss out on is putting yourself, if you really want to be one of the best in this sport, putting yourself in an advantageous position, being
Yeah.
being the small fish in a big pond and being able to do that. I think that's what a lot of lifters miss. People that won't drive
Well,
20 minutes to a gym, and you guys are
I
driving
didn't,
2.5 hours.
when I was that age, I didn't know if I could be the best, the best or one of the best in the world or my generation. But I didn't want to leave the chance either. So I was willing to drive and go put the work in and see if it was possible. And, I just kept seeing if it was possible for 15 years and became one of the better ones, But the point is, I think anybody has the ability. I just think it's, do they have all the other intangibles that you need to be good, which is, are you willing to drive 2.5 hours? Are you willing to sacrifice money for getting stronger? And to be honest with you, in my opinion, what does my opinion matter, made some of the wrong decisions. They decided to get strong versus get careers and go to school. I was somehow able to balance all of it to where not only was I getting world-class strong, but I was getting master's degrees and getting good job offers and getting looked at by military and police and fire departments to have help them. And the point is like I knew that I couldn't just be a strong guy. I had to have all the other things, available to me. And, that was kind of one of the things I consider a negative at that place is like you don't hear a lot of guys coming out of there being business moguls or super rich or having other things, available to them. I mean, a lot of times that kind of stuff tends to draw in people that just don't have a lot of other shit going on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the problem is that, it's not necessarily a problem for me, but I was able to somehow juggle being a good lifter and having the other stuff I needed to be successful in life, which is, just as important, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so talking about that, talk about your belt squat and some stuff that you've done, since then.
Yeah, so I was actually, my belt squat design had originally come from a guy up north. He had made one, and he was like, "Hey, try this out and see what you think." And I was a welder and a fabricator as well. Well, the guy had told me, "Hey, this thing will hold a ton of weight, blah blah blah." Well, no surprise to you guys, I broke the damn thing in a week and a half. But it gave me a really good idea. I was like, man, if I could just make this stronger in certain spots and play around with it a little bit, I think I could get this thing to feel like a real squat. So literally 2 years go by. I'm making like one every couple months in my garage, bringing it in, testing it, breaking it, maybe liking something but not liking another thing. And then after about 2012, maybe 13, I actually dialed in how it was supposed to feel and what it needed to actually function and do. And I think that was a huge proponent of my raw squat getting crazy. And not only that, I think that was the transition point of me becoming not only big and strong, but actually starting to get lean and strong. Because I was able to do so much more work. Whereas if I tried to do that with a straight bar, my back would be grenaded. Yeah. So I started realizing I was on to something. Well, what gave me the idea is, I can't remember who stopped over first. It might have been Joe Ken from the Panthers or somebody else, and they get on it and like, dude, I got to have this for one of my teams because, we're in season. I have a hard time getting the guys that want a back squat with a straight bar because their backs or their necks are messed up. And, man, it really worked to have these and get them into the football guys. I think I could get them to do more leg work. Fast forward a couple years later, they got multiple machines in the NFL. So now we have those in the, they're at the Kansas City Chiefs, they're at the Philadelphia Eagles, and at the Carolina Panthers, and the Los Angeles Lakers just ordered 2.
That's awesome.
So the point is that they're starting to figure out that, well, you're absolutely right. Most people are absolutely right. I just think there's no replacement for barbell squats, but in certain sports, in certain instances, sometimes barbell squats are not your best option because of the amount of compressive forces you're going to deal with on vertebrae. So if you're talking guys that are sprinters, guys that are basketball players, jumpers, those types of things. You're going to have to figure out how to get those muscles strong in a squat style without having the mileage. Because they're already accumulating so much mileage in their sport. Just like powerlifters accumulate mileage on the barbell squat, you have to figure out how to improve the barbell squat without increasing mileage. And that's really where the trick is in the belt squat machine. The difference between mine and others is that, one day I'm squatting with it. This is, like I said, the evolution process. Probably 3 years ago, I'm getting ready for a big raw competition. I think it was the meet I squatted 865 raw, which was, there was only a handful of guys even close to 900 right then. And I was training with it really heavy, and I can't remember if my training partners were on vacation, something, or I had to come in at an off time because I was flying somewhere, like doing a seminar, and I got pinned in that machine. I got down, I couldn't get out of it. And somehow I finagled my way out, and I was like, man, wouldn't it be cool if I designed some kind of a stopper that I could adjust and maybe put it right below where I get stuck, like at the bottom of the squat, or if I got to give out, and then I can just crawl out of it.
Yeah.
So I designed that self-adjustable spotter so that way I could go super heavy. So now if I have to travel or I have to go in super early, I'll just set that spotter like a half an inch deeper than where I squat, and I'll go balls to wall on the squat with no spotters. And it feels exactly the same. So that was an evolution point. Then you have a lot of idiots that order it, and then they're like, oh, man, this thing bottoms out on the floor pan. And then you look at it, and they got like 6 feet of adjustment chain between that and the carabiner. So I started selling people different size belts because, people can't figure out common sense. So just little stuff like that to where now the machine comes with 2 belts. It comes with a built-in spotter. It's got a gap in between the floor plate so you can't ding it. It always looks brand new all the time. And then the coating was the next step. We started getting to the point where we were building so many of them and getting these connections with these powder coaters that now we can almost coat it any color and it's powder coated. It's not painted. So it's much more durable and much stronger. That's when I started noticing the other proteins really catching on because now it seems to fit in with these other companies, high quality, great stuff, versus just being a meathead piece that works really well, but maybe doesn't have the finishes to fit in like highbrow facilities. Yeah. And that's where it really changed. And then the next step is going to be we're making it to where it's more usable for many things. So like your pullback, we can get it to dislocate, and then you can use it for deadlifting. You can actually lock the rear mechanism on it to where if you want to do bent over rows, you got something sturdy to lean against. I got a couple little designs that are going to come out with the new model that I think are going to make it a lot more versatile. And then we're going to build like a half moon piece on the hinge. So I've been doing it a lot with my donkey calf raises. And I've noticed it really hits my calves really well, but there's a couple little design changes I want to make for that. So basically it just, I was a fabricator. I knew how to weld. That's how I paid my way through school. So I just cut apart and played around with different pieces for the last 10 or 15 years to get it to where I felt like it worked better for me. And if it works better for me, it probably works better for everybody else.
Yeah, it's constantly evolving. And
yeah.
One cool thing that I noticed when I got to squat on your belt squat was it's very close. It mimics your actual back squat as far as weight. Like if you have 4 plates on there and your back squat's 4 plates, it's going to be damn near max effort.
Well, and that was the other thing. So way before I started building mine, other machines were out, and I would put, say, 6 or 8 plates on each side, which should be fairly buckling. And I'm like, I can do this for 10 reps. I started realizing that their leverages were all off. And that's what took a long time was to figure out how long the tongue needs to be, how long, and what the angles needed to be for the weights to load. And to be honest with you, I didn't use any of my biomechanical background on it. I just kept cutting it apart and re-welding it until I felt like it weighed what I wanted it to weigh. And then my buddy goes, he's a hunter. He's like, why don't you just bring in a deer scale and start weighing it? And then you could figure out, you could say an inch longer, an inch shorter until you figured it out. So I started playing with deer scales with it. And we got the frame to weigh 55 pounds, just like a squat bar. And then when you put 135 on it, it weighs 135 or 145, it's a 10-pound over bar.
Yeah.
But the point is that now it's a 1-to-1 ratio. So what what the pro football and basketball teams like about it is that say you got a guy with a shoulder or neck injury and can squat. Well, if he can squat, say, 405 on that machine, his back squat's still 405. So it keeps them able to keep an eye on where their strength is versus just saying, well, just go work out. I don't really know how much that machine weighs.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
exactly. So LeBron James is going to be squatting on that belt squat for the Lakers. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, unfortunately, I probably won't get any footage of it because, they're so tight-knit and they don't let anybody really record in there. It kind of sucks, but yeah, I mean, he'll definitely get his hands on it for sure.
Well, maybe you could get him to give you a shout out for it when he when he takes this NBA by storm again this year.
Yeah, we'll see, man. We'll see. I'm hoping when they order them that they'll ask me to come out and give them a tutorial on it. That way I can get some connections out there to kind of show them how to use the machine properly and all the different variations that I use it with. Because most people order it and they think, well, I can just now have a belt squat machine, but they don't realize it works really well for stiff-legged deadlifts. It works well for lunges, all those types of things. Without having to worry about falling, especially like the lunge, you can use it just as a hand position to where if you got a guy that's injured or in an elbow sling or something, he can still do heavy lunges and not have to worry about busting his butt.
Yeah. So kind of wrapping it up, where can people find all this stuff at? Where can people follow you at? Check out all your information.
Well, if you go on winningstrength.com, spelled like my last name, WENNING, you'll find that, we have equipment, we have training DVDs, we have online coaching options, we have clothing lines that are pretty cool and get shipped out pretty fast with a lot of my custom logos. And then I'm always on Instagram. I'm at Real Matt Wenning, so my name is just Real in the front of it. The Ludus Magnus Gym has its own Facebook page, and then we're on YouTube under Winning Strength for all the podcasts that we do as well. So we got Bill Kazmaier and George Halbert and guys who's played the pro football ranks, and we got Dana Lynn Bailey. So we got a lot of really cool people on our show. And actually, we just got really lucky that a lot of those people wanted to come and train at Ludus last year.
Yeah, absolutely.
And decided that they podcast. So that's pretty cool. So that's where you can find me, and I'm in Columbus, Ohio. We do a lot of private assessments and seminars. We got a bench seminar coming up in a couple weeks here at the gym. And I just did a seminar out in Utah last weekend. So.
Oh wow.
Well, Matt,
yeah.
Thank you so much for the information, man. We really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, man, not a problem at all.
Thank you, man.